Welcome to another amazing episode of Talking Sense. This entire season of Talking Sense is the Empowered CMO season. So every episode we are featuring women CMOs, women advisors, women CEOs, industry leaders, women that are changing the face of marketing. And so I had to go out and recruit the one and only Noreen Allen. And what you're going to learn in hearing her experience is she's the IPO Queen. Those are my words. We all talk about the bucket list of being able to ring that bell. And she's got multiple, 2 times experience, I believe. Am I correct, Noreen? 2 times you rung that bell? I mean, that's...
3.
I stand corrected. 3-time bell ringer. And 20 plus years experience in marketing, including 9 at Bandwidth, where she is today. And all of us CMOs out there, we know 9 years at one run, you're doing something right. You're beating the odds multiple times over. So really, really excited to hear from her. Welcome to Talking Sense.
Thanks, Latané. Excited to be here today with you.
One of the things that we were emailing about in prep for this was just what's interesting in your career is you've helped grow these companies through multiple stages, ultimately to the bell ringing. And I would expect that the role changes. And so I'd love to dig into just what it really takes by stage, like what's different stage by stage by stage.
Yeah, sure. So it is different. It's so different in those early days of a company that is maybe just has a little bit of seed funding, maybe going out for that Series A, versus a company that's more mature, that maybe has some private equity funding, that is looking to IPO. And so the role definitely changes in time for the marketing leaders. For me, if I'm looking back at just Bandwidth and my 9 years at Bandwidth, in the early days, we were bootstrapped. We had very little outside investment in the company. This was 2012 when I joined. Tiny marketing team. It was at the time I had 2 two full-time people on the team, and trying to think about, okay, how do we get out? We were lucky when I was there. We had a couple of when I first joined, we had a couple of big name logos, which was great. Names like Google. And when you have a name like that, it makes it easier to go out and establish credibility and bring in other customers. But what we didn't have was a marketing budget to go out and spend on ads or tools or programs or shows. So we had to be really creative and really scrappy. And so the approach we took at that point was really an ABM, a low-tech ABM approach. So I right away at Bandwidth brought in a couple of outside folks that were focused on research. 2 people focused on research. We identified the ICP and just had them go out and build lists of the companies that were our targets, and they'd go find all the right buyer personas within those companies, build lists, and then we would just drop them into cadences and just start trying to engage these folks. So the early days, it was a surgical, I used to always say that before you were hearing ABM as much, we were taking this very surgical approach to go after that ideal customer profile. And then as we started to bring in a few more customers, and we were starting to look at our options as a company and think about, okay, what does that path look like? Is IPO a possibility? At that phase, then the strategic positioning of the company becomes so important, because if you're looking to take a company public, you have to be able to show the market where you fit. You want to show that you're part of a big growing market, and you want to show your unique position within that market and where it's headed. And so the strategic positioning, like just the educating the market, analyst relations became really, really important. I engaged firms like Gartner and IDC and Forrester and a couple of others that were really key in helping to shape that story, but then just adding credibility to the story. The better they understood it, they have a direct line into the investor community. They're able to support that story as they're talking to investors and bankers and all of that. But so over the years, it just changed. It really depended on sort of where the company was. Was the company at a stage when it was all about driving top line growth and you weren't as focused on profitability or margin? So, I've been with companies over the years that were like that, where it was just top line. So you went out and made a big splash and invested a lot to bring in the big logos and to build that brand and have big awareness. But that takes a lot of budget. And so if you're not in that environment, if you're in that more bootstrapped environment like I was in the early days of Bandwidth, it requires a different approach. And for a CMO, it's depending on the situation, and I'm sure you've had these experiences too. Sometimes you're brought in and you're rolling up your sleeves and you're in the weeds doing the work. And there are other seasons that you're in where you're leading a big team and providing that strategic direction to the team. But I think you've got to be successful. You've got to have the willingness and just the stomach for contributing at those different levels, depending on where the company is.
So you use the word situational, which I think is a great word, because literally before you even said that, I was thinking, gosh, she must have such great situational awareness. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes there is a perception that you are a growth CMO or you are a category positioning CMO or a product marketing CMO.
Yeah.
And all of those come, and then there's a perception around what stage you do or don't do. But I guess I look at you and I see, wow, this is the perfect CMO with situational awareness to know if you're going to stick with a company, you might need to change what you are depending on the stage.
So I think the key thing is really, you've got to be willing to evolve. You have to be willing to evolve your approach. And you're right. There are a lot of CMOs that get pigeonholed that, well, they're just early stage. And this is the person that's going to take you public. And this is the person that you want once you're a big public company as your leader. And look, I think there are legitimate situations where maybe a CEO or a board says, you know what, we need to bring someone in that's been there, done that. Like, we need to bring in a seasoned leader that understands this next phase. We're at 20 million ARR. We think we need someone else that's going to get us to 100 million or that's going to get us on the path to IPO. So I think there are legitimate situations where that might be necessary. But I think that if a CMO really thinks about their role and is willing to evolve their approach, I think they can absolutely grow with the company and evolve with the company. But what's required for that, number one, it's really being in tune with what's needed and what's most important for the organization. And so whereas in the beginning, maybe it was top line revenue, but maybe as you're evolving, it's the goal is really moving more into the enterprise. Mm-hmm. So shifting the approach, shifting that go-to-market motion so that you're more fit for the enterprise. Maybe it's more of a focus on profitability. Maybe it's unlocking the channel, whatever's necessary. Number one, you have to be in tune with that. And by the way, the CMO should be part of that conversation. You should be part of that conversation with investors, with the CEO, to understand what is the path. Where do we want to be? Do we want to take this company public? Do we want to get more funding? Do we want to dress ourselves up for acquisition? They're all different paths, and what's really important for each one of those is different. So understanding that is the first thing. The second thing, I think, is really just realizing that you can't just use the same playbook that you used in the past at this company or at prior companies. And the cool thing with marketing, and the thing I love about marketing is, first of all, it's always changing, which is exciting, but can be challenging. But the playbooks for every company are right in front of us to learn from. So let's say you're looking, your company's going to go public and you've never done that before. You don't know how to prepare. You could go look up the last 20 IPOs and dive into those companies. Go to Net Roadshow, pull down their roadshow presentations. Go use the Wayback Machine, the website, the site that you go look at old versions of the website. Look how their website evolved over time. Look at their investor pitch. Learn from them about read their 10K, read their S1 to see how they were positioning the company and what they were doing. I think it's also really important that as CMOs, we know where our gaps are, and we understand that, okay, I got this company to 20 million in revenue and we want to go to the next level, and I'm feeling a little bit like maybe the board has some concern or investors have some concern about me. You got to look at yourself and be honest. Where are your gaps? Are your gaps maybe in just scaling the company to that level? Are they around the brand side? Are they around the demand gen metrics side? Be honest with yourself and then look to supplement. Look to supplement those gaps, whether it's bringing in a consultant to help with an area. Maybe it's a key hire where you bring someone in under you that's got a lot more domain experience than you do in a given area, or even just relying on friends. I've had so many folks over the years that just over a couple glasses of wine, I'm reviewing their investor pitch deck or I'm reviewing their press release and marking it up and giving them suggestions. And I've gone to friends for the same kind of advice. And so I think if you're willing to adapt, if you're in tune with where your gaps are, and you're always open to learning. I mean, let's face it, podcasts like this one that you're doing and everything you do, Latané, to try to educate CMOs, you're one fabulous resource, and there are many others out there. And so I think if you're committed to learning and committed to putting the work in to evolve your approach, to educate yourself, to learn from those best of breed companies, you can absolutely hang in there through the different phases. But you got to put the work in, and you got to realize that what you did at the last 2 or 3 companies may not be what's needed at this one.
It's interesting. I remember when we were prepping, we talked about stuff gets stale. Like the notion of coming with a marketing playbook.
Yeah.
I don't know if that even works, because once it's kind of been done and everyone's doing it, there's diminishing returns. So I think it's almost like you have to come with a lot of curiosity, which you talked about, and some sort of pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to say, yeah, we can't do what we did 5 years ago, but it's similar. And I see some sort of pattern. But anyway, and I loved how you talked about doing research. We have a technical term for that here. It's called sleuthing. That's the technical term. But I loved your tips on sleuthing, because you're right. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel. It's easier to improve than start from scratch.
Absolutely. And you're right. It is easy for you to just get in this rhythm of kind of running the same plays that you've run for a while. This happens to me. I mean, even with my team today, we've been talking a lot about this lately, where I've got an awesome team and we've had a lot of really great success. But when I look at certain elements of what we're doing, I'm like, man, we're doing the same thing we've been doing for several years. And the go-to-market motion for B2B tech sales has really changed and evolved. And so we're having a lot of conversations internally about how can we evolve this? How can we evolve this and level up this approach? But I think back to the conversation of CMOs, it's if you allow yourself to just sort of coast and rely on those same plays, I think that's when the board, the investors, the CEO might say, we need some fresh ideas. Mm-hmm. We need some fresh thinking to get us to the next level. But if they see that you are capable of bringing that fresh thinking to the table and always pushing the limits and trying to level up, you should absolutely be able to stay in that role and continue on with the company in its journey.
So speaking of fresh thinking, I remember your presentation from RevTech. I think it was in Boston. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, wow, she is like a savant at positioning. And I believe the presentation was talking about pre-IPO bandwidth and how you had to change the positioning to make it not seem small.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, you solved this small problem, right? Because investors, everyone's betting on potential. And the first step of potential is the market, not your company. Like the first they need to bet is this market big enough with enough potential? Then we'll evaluate, Noreen and the exec team and if they can actually do it. And I thought you just did a fabulous job of that. Maybe just share like a little bit of that kind of thought process and then the positioning that you ended up rolling out.
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you, by the way, for that. So before, we were looking to potentially take the company public, and we were not well known by the investor community at the time, and definitely not well understood. And we sought out to really carve out our position within the industry. And so just for some quick context, so Bandwidth is a communication software company. We work with companies that want to add voice or messaging or video into an application or build a solution around it. So on one side, we compete with companies like Twilio, and Twilio's done a fantastic job of carving this whole new category called CPaaS, Communications Platform as a Service, where they've made it really easy to do those things. So on one side, it's companies like Twilio. On another side, it's carriers like AT&T and Verizon. And so if you want to take the company public, you want to be valued like a software company, like the Twilios of the world. But our story was really somewhere in the middle. So we spent a bunch of time working with the research analysts, the Gartners, IDCs of the world, and working with them. They were just starting to cover this category. It was a new category for them. They're just starting to cover it. We were nowhere. This is before Magic Quadrants and all of that are created, but we were nowhere on anyone's radar. So we really spent time with them. They sort of looked at CPaaS as it's this bucket, that Twilio's in. And we spent the time to educate them on the fact that, yeah, Twilio's got a great solution. And yes, they're here, but the CPaaS bucket is this big. And there are these other categories of CPaaS. And what we're delivering is this software-powered communication solution. We compete with them in some cases, but we also sell into different categories. And so really working with the analysts to make them realize that it's actually a bigger category and showing them the potential that exists selling into the enterprise, selling into all of these platforms like Zoom and Teams and Google that also sell into the enterprise. So taking the time to educate the analysts first, that was key. And I recommend to everyone that if you're not working with the research analysts, you really should, because they, as I said earlier, they've got a direct line into the investor community, and that the research analysts are who the investors look to, and investment banks and VCs, they look to the research analysts. It is. And so you show up in the right spot in the Forrester Wave or in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and you're in good shape. And so you should know about that, right? You guys just showed up really, really well there. But that part's really important. That part is really important. And so spending the time to educate the analysts. And what you want to do is really show your niche within the market, but show that you're part of a big and growing market. And so for me, the other big important thing on the positioning side is I really like to break everything down into layman's terms. I think so often as marketers, we are tempted to use industry jargon. And I kind of just did in my explanation. I was using some industry jargon, and you lose people. You lose people, whether it's an investor, whether it's an analyst, whoever it is. So breaking things down into terms everyone can understand. And so I take the time, even with investors, to talk about, well, Bandwidth is a communication software company. You're using Bandwidth every day where you live, work, and play. And then I give examples of some of the solutions you might be using. You get an alert from your dentist's office, that's coming from Bandwidth. You're dialing into a Teams call or a Zoom call, that's Bandwidth. Your connected device, your Google Home device, that's Bandwidth for calling. And so I like to give examples that make it real, because at the end of the day, these investors that you're trying to convince to invest in your company, they're people, and they don't want all of that, inside baseball, very tech talk. Like, it's going to go over their head. So I like to get them really jazzed about the Bandwidth story by giving them examples that they're very likely living each day, because then they go off, they leave that meeting with me, they go off and they're they get an alert on their phone for something, or they see
I'm
another app.
working, I'm playing, and Bandwidth is everywhere.
Exactly. And they're thinking there's a massive adjustable market for Bandwidth. And so I think that element as well, nailing your story, breaking it down into layman's terms that they can really understand, is really important on the positioning side.
So live, work, and play.
So I didn't coin that.
I love that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I did not coin that. I heard that somewhere. And thought it made a lot of sense. And so we have this slide that's kind of this day in the life slide that shows how you're using Bandwidth in all of those scenarios. So we talk about that a lot, but I don't recall where I first heard that phrase, but it was definitely something I was inspired by, something I heard along the way with that.
Well, success has many fathers, right? Our mothers, success has many mothers.
Yeah.
It's the Empowered series. What exactly. Am I doing?
I love it.
Love. Oh my goodness. Well, I want to change gears here a little bit and talk about taking the company, just that little part of the IPO. Because I'm asking for a friend here, but it seems really awesome. And so
I love it.
Like, what was your role? Like, what did you have to, I'm sure you had to put together all the, the deck and the S1, and so like, give us the play-by-play.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. It was really fun. So, I was lucky in that very early on in my career, I was part of a company that went public, and this is years ago. This is like pre-Sarbanes-Oxley. It was a very different world back then, but we didn't have anyone in an investor relations role. And so not only was I doing everything for the IPO, but then I ended up like having to serve in an investor relations role, and I'm in my early 20s, and so clueless. It was
what a great experience, though. I feel like when you're most clueless is when you learn the most.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I could tell you some stories where I just fumbled, and yeah, but I did learn a lot. I learned a lot, but I was really uncomfortable. So I had that experience early on and kind of cut my teeth, on that. But when it came time to IPO at Bandwidth, this was in 2017. It had been many years since I did the IPO. So the first step for me was, okay, I got to go back and like see how this works now in this new world. And so yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done it, but it was years ago. I was a dumb 20-something at the time. And so anyway, so I first went and pulled all the recent IPOs from that year. And then I pulled just IPOs of companies in our category and companies that we would be compared to, and went back and looked at all of their materials. And you can find most of this online. So today, when you IPO, you have to go, you go on this roadshow, this 2-week roadshow where you're traveling all around, meeting with different investors. And in advance of that, you have to create this roadshow video that the roadshow video, there are some that it's literally just a recording of the CEO, CFO, delivering a PowerPoint presentation.
I bet that was not
There
good.
are other roadshow videos that could win an Academy Award.
Oh my God, that sounds so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it was, okay. I have a really fun story around this. So, but I mean, there are some that are such high production value and just super, super cool. And so we landed somewhere in the middle, but definitely closer to the super cool. But this roadshow video is, they put it out on the web so that potential investors can see it and can hear the story brought to life. So the pitch for the investor meetings, the roadshow video are some big elements. Then you go through, in advance of all of that, when you're in this sort of courting phase with the banks, you have to do these big pitch meetings where it involves several leaders from your company getting up and sort of walking through the whole business. Then you'll get to a point where you have an analyst day, where the analysts who are going to be in your syndicate come in and you're pitching to them, and you have all of your leaders get up and pitch. So one of the most important things I was working on in this whole lead up was the story, like really nailing the story, and not just the positioning, but all the unique elements of the story. What's our process on the product side? What's our process within engineering? What's our people services approach? You know, how can we bring our culture to life? Nailing all of that, bringing all of that to life, but then, man, you got to get your shit in order and have your story straight and have all of your leaders need to be on. So you want to start investing now in speaker training.
I'm so anal. People know that have worked with me. I'd be like, again, do it again. Shorter, tighter.
Yeah. Oh, Latané, that was me. So there are folks on our executive team that I think have scar tissue from the prep sessions, because I was such a pain with just, let's try it again. And how about this time we try it with, and I would, so I'm the most annoying, like, director producer in these environments. But when you get to the point where this stuff is needed, you don't have much time. So if you've got your eye on IPO, you want to work on not just the overall company story. You really want to look at the story for the different units within your business. You really want to start working on your leaders and make sure you develop them now. You develop that talk track now. You want to make sure you have some really great customer stories and customers that are going to be willing to go on camera for you, where you have these really great, meaningful stories that investors are going to connect with and understand. So those were some of the elements that I was working on. There was, in the lead up, all the stuff I described earlier with the work with analysts, that was sort of the early work, the brand work that was related. Having that predictable revenue engine built and dialed in, and having every metric, like, you better know every metric backwards and forwards, because you will get picked apart by these analysts and investors if you don't. So you want to have all that dialed in and have that ready to go, but then start working on the other parts of the business and just make sure, hey, this is our time on stage, and this is your shot. But it really comes down to, you're selling your company, and the people and their ability to inspire the folks that are listening to them is so critically important. And as CMO, who better than the CMO to really lead this and really set the right tone with the team? I mean, down to, I was telling people, I need you to wear this, I need you to wear that, I need you to play the role of this person. And
our CEO,
I'm not even kidding you. When we filmed
I was just going to say a quick story. Our CEO knows, because before one of our customer conferences, I called him and I said, I know you like that, like, Mr. Rogers sweater thing. Do you have a structured jacket you can wear? Something with a little more structure. He was like, yes, I have a sport coat. I'm like, okay, great, thank you. Oh.
Yeah, I've rolled in with wardrobe. I have actually provided wardrobe for people where it's like, let's try this shirt. Let's try this, let's try that. And then even like the furniture, we had film crew come in. We filmed a lot in our office, and just some of the furniture options we had weren't great. I'm like, I need to stay, set design like place coming in with like, I need cooler furniture. So it was funny. It was really funny. So yeah, it was a really fun experience. But yeah, I mean, you're at that stage to get the initial investment banks on board to see the vision for your company. They have to understand the story. They have to understand that long-term 5-year plan. They need to see that revenue engine. But you are drawing them into your business. You are getting them excited to want to be a part of this, and it's a show. So
Showtime.
You can orchestrate all of that.
I love a good show.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So I'll tell you real quick. So for our video, we have a fantastic CEO, just such a good guy, and such an authentic person. He's just fantastic. So so we're based in Raleigh, and we're really proud of Raleigh. And we also have this great culture within Bandwidth. We're focused on letting people lead full lives, and so we do a lot of fun things as part of the culture. And so our CEO he's into fitness, and so we start out the video. We filmed him running in this really cool park in Raleigh. He's just doing his run in the morning, like as the sun's coming up. Really dramatic footage. And then he gets to the top of the hill, and he's looking out at Raleigh. But our ticker symbol is BAND, BAND. So we're talking about options for, what we could do for a song. And actually, one of our biggest customers suggested this to us. They said, hey, for your song, for your IPO video, you should try to get the Who song joined together with the band. And the main line is that join together with the band.
Good.
It's a really cool song. Okay. And the beginning part is this like build up. It's like, I don't want to do it now, but it's this super cool like lead up. So the group that's doing our video, we work with an agency, and then a guy I've worked with for years producing videos. And the agency was like, we'll never get the rights to that. We can't use it. And this guy that I worked with was like, let me try. So 3 days later, we got the rights. They had to reach out to Roger Daltrey directly because he is the publisher on the song. But we got the rights to use that song. So that was our IPO song. And so when we're at NASDAQ ringing the bell and doing everything, we played that song there. It was so awesome. It was so awesome. But it was like, as soon as I heard you're never going to get it, I'm like, watch us.
I was about to
We're
say,
getting it.
I don't think
We're getting it.
tell
So anyway.
Noreen, no. I don't feel like that's probably a good idea. Just based on this interview, and
it was fun.
Oh.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really, really fun. So start thinking about that. Start thinking about and I like at the time I was really inspired by Shopify went public before we did, and they had this super moving roadshow video, and I got a lot of ideas watching that. But same thing as for me with everything in marketing, just keep your eyes open. You might get that next cool idea when you're grabbing coffee in the morning at the coffee shop or watching someone else's presentation or whatever. And so I think looking for those sources, but you should start thinking about this now.
Since I've basically finished Netflix, maybe roadshow videos are where I go next. I don't know.
Isn't that bad? Oh, man.
Oh, Lord.
What does that say about us? I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same boat. Yeah.
Sounds awesome. It's on. So I want to switch gears here and now talk a little bit about your team, and honestly, then we talked about the different stages and being able to kind of augment yourself and have the situational awareness. And, you had sent me some diagrams of your team, and what I love about it is no matter what stage you're in, I think you do have to always be thinking about the end in mind and the scale. Right? So maybe, your org structure is not appropriate for a Series B company. But you have to know where you're going to get to so that you put the building blocks in place along the way. And so I think you've done some genius things around your go-to-market teams as well as your product teams. Maybe explain how you got there and why it's working.
Yeah, sure. So the team's evolved a lot over the years, and I expect that it will continue to. And but the state that we're in now has been working well for us. And so, kind of at the heart of the team, in the middle, we have a marketing ops and analytics team, and then we have a demand gen team that is all of our demand gen channels. Then we also have what we call digital agency. It's strategy and digital agency, and brand lives there. Content, design, multimedia, all of those things, campaigns, social media, all live in that group. So that's kind of the core in the center. And then the two sort of areas of input for strategy and direction. First is our product marketing team. So our product marketing team is aligned by market segment. So we have 3 target segments that we sell into today. And we used to have the product marketing team aligned by product.
Yes.
But, we've got a bunch of different products and we sell those products into different segments. But we found that when they were aligned by product, each of those product owners was having to stay on top of so many different buyer personas in all the different segments. And so we said, let's align them by market segment instead. And they'll be responsible for all of our products going into that segment, but they'll be really in tune with what motivates that buyer persona. What are the nuances around how we need to position the collection of products for that market segment? So that was a big shift we made, and man, has it helped. It's really just helped to drive great alignment into the organization. And we're just doing more relevant things. And so that team, so one of our segment leaders, for example, focuses on the SaaS market. So they're focused on SaaS. So they're really looking at who are the targets within that space? What are the use cases? What motivates that buyer persona? We've named all the buyer personas, and they really go deep on that person and what motivates them and what they're thinking about at the different stages. They're also responsible for really looking at the broader market dynamics. Yep. What's happening in the market that's going to change things for this segment?
Like trigger events, right? For why they would buy.
Absolutely. I mean, everything is relative, right, to what's happening in the market. And so they're looking at those market dynamics. They're looking at competitors for that space. They then create the go-to-market plan for each one of those 3 segments. And they feed that go-to-market plan down to the rest of the marketing team. So everyone else is then working on creating the campaigns and the tools and the resources. This digital agency creates all of that, and they feed it to demand gen and all the activation channels. And there's this really great constant feedback loop, between the two. So that's sort of the top end of our little marketing but org structure. The other end of it is our marketing programs team. The marketing programs team is aligned by sales team. So we have a marketing program manager for each one of our sales teams, and they're really responsible for they're almost like the director of marketing for that sales team. They're responsible for really understanding what are the goals for this sales team. What are the revenue targets? What are the revenue targets by rep? What are the pipeline targets? What are the struggles that they're experiencing? Who are the targets they're going after? Are they going after the right targets? Do they have the right, they create playbooks for their teams, for the different sort of subcategories they're going after. So they work with them with that. They're putting cadences in place that they can use. They're partnering with them when there's a big company we're going after. They're doing some custom stuff to try and engage these accounts. And so they also are, so they're really in tune with that sales team and that sales leader. They're making sure that all the great go-to-market materials that product marketing fed through and the marketing team created, they're making sure that that's all being activated, that's
and
all
I'm
being
sure,
used.
like being the front lines of enabling, because you could come up with the best messaging, but if no one can articulate it and it's not getting used.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, having done this for many years, you can create some fantastic campaigns and roll them out, but if you don't have sales on board and they're not using it, and sometimes it's just a question of like getting their attention. Like there's a lot of stuff they've got and they're worried about closing a deal and this cool campaign that you created, it's just not top of mind for them. So they make sure that we have that enablement, we have that engagement. They're also this really fantastic source of feedback for the rest of marketing. So they go back to the rest of marketing and say, hey, here's what's happening on the street. Here's what's happening with the reps. That piece of content you created that you think is so great, well, it's really not landing. Or here's what I'm hearing. Like they're sitting on discovery calls. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Here's what I'm hearing. And on discovery calls from prospects, like maybe we need to create content around this topic. And so on both sides, then we get really great feedback from the buyer and from the broader market, from product marketing, and we get really great feedback from sales from this programs team. And it helps to keep the whole marketing team just more informed and focused on what's really most meaningful and most relevant. And so, and then I'll have folks sometimes say to me, the programs team wants to do this. I'm really not sure if that makes sense. And I'll say, hey, when was the last time you were on a call with a prospect? When was the last time you talked to a sales rep? Like I respect everyone's opinion and I want everyone's opinion. But if your opinion's just based on your gut and like sort of theory or your old playbook and not what's actually happening, then there's an issue with that. And so this is kind of a nice way for us to stay in touch. And I'll also tell you, just great bonus, when we introduced this team, it's probably 3 years ago now, our relationship with the sales team, we've always had a really great relationship with the sales team at the leadership levels, but down through the ranks, our relationship with the sales reps has just strengthened so much. And sales reps are always reaching out to me like, man, I just joined Bandwidth and I've never worked at a place that had such a great partnership and had so much support for marketing. And so much of that is driven by the programs team. So we've got a rock star team of folks there. And it's really had a big impact.
Sales is a ground game. So, that's where they need the support.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you have to be aligned at the higher levels on segmentation and ICP and territory design and those type of things. But ultimately, everything's going to like either land or we said not land at that field level. What I love is, so one of the things that we talk a lot about and a lot of this, a big theme of actually this series is the concept of a market officer versus a marketing officer. And when I heard you describing this org structure, I'm like, she's getting her teams as close to the market as possible, right? And making sure, right, that product is as close to the markets they serve, as well as those go-to-market teams are as close to the market and the action and where deals are happening. So I think it's brilliant. I can see. I'm thinking, I was thinking about the easier road, and the road, quite frankly, I'm taking right now, which maybe I'll have to evolve, is to align to how products are developed, right? Because product marketing is working so closely with product. And product doesn't always align the way they design products to market segments, right? So there's always this constant, I think that's what makes that role so challenging, honestly, is just the push and pull between market and product. It's just an observation, but.
Yeah, it is. It's and exactly. And I think it can work both ways. We just found that really aligning around that buyer and how they buy
I like it.
and what motivates them, like that was the changing point for
I
us.
like
Yeah.
it. I like it. Very, very smart. So, uh, amazing. We've covered a lot of ground here. We covered asking for a friend and went through the IPO process. So thanks for humoring me on that one. We covered kind of how situational awareness required as a CMO to have a 9-year run and to stay relevant, which is just amazing. Hats off to you. And then, the organizational design to support all of the success that you're having and get the teams closer to the market. So absolutely love it. Now it's time for our next little segment here on the show, which is nonsense. Like what are you just calling nonsense on? What's the buzzword or conventional wisdom or just that thing that when you hear it, you're like, okay, nails on the chalkboard. Can we not do that anymore? Anything that you just want to rage on for a second.
So one thing as it relates to marketing, and we've had recent conversations as we were setting goals for the year, and folks saying, we need to measure marketing influence of this, like the marketing influenced pipeline or the marketing influenced revenue. That drives me nuts because I think it's meaningless. I think at the end of the day, if you're a marketing leader, you need to be tied to the total revenue number, the total pipeline number, and marketing the impact of your work should impact everything. Whether you feel like you were directly involved and can attribute it back to a click on a website or a form fill at an event or whatever, if we're doing our job as marketers, we're building the right kind of differentiated brand. We're building that awareness. We're bringing in the right types of targets that are in market that need a solution and teeing up opportunities for our sales organization. Therefore, we should get credit for the whole thing. And we shouldn't worry about what was from us versus what was from sales directly. That drives me bananas when people try to split it apart because I want my team focused on the total revenue number. And because then if we're behind on that number or we're behind on the pipeline number, I want them standing on the table trying to figure out what needs to be changed to get to this total revenue number. Because if we hit the marketing influence, exactly. Exactly. Because look, if you hit the marketing influence number, but your company doesn't hit its total number, well, that doesn't help anything. And so I don't like these conversations of trying to split out marketing influence. I really think the most successful marketing orgs are so tightly aligned with sales and are measured the same way, are measured on revenue and pipeline and not on anything activity focused or things that just marketing touched. So I think that would be the one that's recent for me because it came up in a lot of goals conversations. So I teed off on that one a number of times in recent weeks.
Well, it's funny. I've been doing these happy hours. What's on your dashboard? Because I'm always fascinated, and I'm always obsessed with my dashboard and tweaking it and like getting all the stuff I want on it. So, I've been doing these, and I show, and it's like I show how I break down pipeline and what we're tracking, and someone said, well, how do you know what's marketing versus other stuff? And I'm like, well, I can go 6 clicks and get there, but I don't really do that. Like, this is where I live, and this is what I care about. And then they said, you're tracking all these different win rates and conversions, but that's not really up to you. That's up to sales. And I'm like, oh no, like we got to be in that together. Like if we together move just one little point of win rate, like that's making it rain a lot more than, great, I got some more leads. Like that's inconsequential. So it's just interesting to see like how different people view their world and their sandbox. I guess you and I we like a big sandbox. I need a beach.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and look, at the end of the day, if within marketing we're bringing in all this great demand, but it's not converting, and you're a CMO, you're measured by revenue, and if you have aspirations to take the company public, like you've got to have that revenue growth. So if the demand you're driving is not converting, you've got to inspect and figure out, okay, we refer to it at Bandwidth as click to revenue. I want to know everything, that happens from that first click to when we ultimately start bringing in revenue. Is there an issue maybe with our lead handoff process? Is there an issue with the way we're engaging, the pitch we're using? Is it a product differentiation issue, product market fit, pricing? Is it a training issue? You want to look at that full funnel and figure out where are the opportunities to fine tune and how do you fine tune? But it can't just stop with, all right, we threw in, we got all this demand into the top. And yeah, like high five, we're killing it. You're not killing it. You're not killing it until you get to the revenue growth numbers. And so I think you have to be really focused on really examining that full funnel. And sometimes folks will say, but that's outside of marketing.
Nope.
Well, it's inside of Bandwidth. It's inside of Bandwidth. And that's what I care about. Like, I don't care where it is. And it's not a personal thing, our head of sales and I have a great relationship, and it's, hey, things are off here. Maybe we need to look at tightening this up. Maybe we need to look at training more here, changing the incentive structure here. And similarly, he'll come and ask me about stuff on my side, but it's gotta be, it can't be sales versus marketing. It's gotta be, you're thinking about all of 6 Sense. I'm thinking about all of Bandwidth. And until we have that revenue growth that we need, I've got to be willing to examine everything to diagnose what's going on. What do I need to fix? And I think that's what ultimately leads to the success that you need to take a company to the next stage.
I love that. I call it finding the red. I'm like, I love red. I found some more red. Red means we can go fix it. It's like having that attitude of like,
yes,
where can I go find something wrong?
I love that too. It's low hanging fruit because look, if everything is like humming and everything's perfect, there's not much opportunity to optimize. But if I discover that, oh crap, like we're missing all this, like this process is off, or like there's some issue, I get excited. Same thing, because I'm like, this is something we can change, and it's an easy change. And another dial that should be able to really improve the results. So I love that. I think it's all about optimizing.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about you. You've had an amazing run, and I'm going to ask a question that comes out of another question, a survey that we did. We asked a lot of different CMOs. How they spend their time, and we had a bunch of different kind of activities. And what we found was that the things that the CMOs were spending their time on, 90% of the activities lined up to what a CEO is expected to do. So I thought, hey, that's interesting. So another question, same survey, same group, was what do you think is next for you? So we asked, like, what's your and beyond, right? And these were all people, current CMOs right now. And a very small percentage said CEO. And that was curious to me, and I thought, I wonder if that's because they don't think it's a possibility. And these were all women, so they just don't think it's on the table, so like why even mentally go there? Or does it just not look very fun? Or something else is going on? And so I just wanted to, I guess, get your take on that as someone who clearly could be, given your chops and experience, a CEO. Like, would that be something you'd want to even do?
Yeah, so for me, I absolutely would. I think it would be really exciting to lead a tech company in particular the thought of it is daunting. It absolutely is. But I'll tell you, for me over the years, there have been so many points where I felt like, oh man, I am in over my head. I have no idea what I'm doing. And you learn as you go and you develop as you go. And so I think I've become comfortable being uncomfortable and become more comfortable over the years with the fact that I don't have to have the domain experience in every area. I don't have the finance experience. I have a little bit on the operations side, but not everything. I don't have the technology experience, but I've become more comfortable with the fact that I could lead those functions because of the experience I have building and scaling companies over the years and the experience on the strategy side and the growth engine side. And I know now that if I surround myself with really strong leaders in their domains, that I could absolutely lead that and would be very comfortable with that. So that's something I definitely think about. I also think a lot about pivoting, and I've gone on record to say that my sort of fantasy for someday is to do something completely different and open a cheese wine cafe kind of thing where you do all these really cool, I'm super into cheese and wine, and you do these really cool cheese tastings and with wine flights and education and all of that, like something you'd see in Tuscany, like something like that.
Oh
And
my
so
God, I'm
I'd
there.
love to do that someday. I think that would be super fun. Yeah. I will let you know. So I'd love that at some point. I just think that would be, I love tech. I love growing companies, would love the opportunity to do that on a bigger scale. But at some point I would also like to do that where I'm spending my days sampling different cheeses and doing pairings and meeting with winemakers and having to go do research trips in France and Italy.
Oh my God.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
I totally led on to, this was a bad idea, but I'm sorry, all of you field marketers out there. I let the cat out of the bag with my leadership team that doing site visits is really just a fancy name for going to cool places on the company. So sorry. But I do love a good site visit.
Oh, yeah. Site visits. Yeah, I know. Me too. I do too. Absolutely. So I think that would be fun. But I don't know, back to your question, I don't know why the folks you interviewed weren't as interested in that path. I think there are a lot of paths to CEO. Sometimes you see folks come up through the finance track. Sometimes it's operations. Sometimes it's marketing or CRO. But no matter what the path, there are always gaps. So if it's a CFO that now suddenly becomes CEO, they are also lacking a lot of that expertise on the technology side and the sales and marketing side and so many other parts of the business, yet they can become very comfortable in that role. And so I think it's just sometimes women, as women, we feel like we have to check every box and we have to have all of the experience and we have to go through the sort of old school management development track where that a lot of really big companies have, where you go do a stint in finance, you go do a stint in the TAC, and you go do a stint in this area. I don't think you have to have that. I mean, I think along the way in your journey, you can look for opportunities to gain some of that experience. So whether it's maybe you have an opportunity to take on customer operations, maybe you have the chance to go do a stint within product or within another org, or even just take on a special assignment. We just acquired a company and had some folks step up to lead the integration.
Oh, that's
so even
great.
opportunities like that,
Great opportunity.
you can go to school, in those times and really accelerate your learning. And so I think it's one, just sort of being eyes wide open. And I mean, and it also has to be something that you feel passion for and want to do. But I think you should never be held back because you feel like you can't do it. you can't do it. And it's something that I think that most moving into that role, other than folks that have been a CEO before, most came up in one track and are going to have gaps. And so just getting comfortable with that and surrounding yourself with strong people, I think more women that are in a CMO role could absolutely be moving into CEO roles.
Well, that's part of my mission for the next little bit is I want longer tenures for CMOs, board opportunities for CMOs, and more CEOs with a marketing background. So we'll see. We'll see if we can move the needle. So last question here.
Yes.
Last question to wrap it up. You learn more from your mistakes. So no one gets off of Talking Sense without sharing big mistake, colossal, can be in your personal life, can be at work, just one of those
So a big mistake. So gosh, there's lots. There's so many over the years. And you're right, you learn more. As painful as they are, as awkward and sometimes embarrassing, I always tell myself, gosh, I'm learning a lot right now. So, and this is going to make me stronger. But I'll share an example from my very early days. So I was with the company and we had just gone public and I'm trying to figure everything out. And at the time there wasn't as much available on the web to really go learn everything, the way I do today. Like I'm just constantly reading and listening to things to try and learn. So that wasn't available back then. So here we are, we hire this investor relations firm out of New York. That's this really fantastic investor relations firm. And I'm on a call with them and we're talking about, I don't even remember what it was. We were talking about an approach with something. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, I had suggested something. And they said, I don't think that's a good idea. We're not really trying to go after retail investors, thinking, retail investors like individual investors versus institutional investors. Well, at the time, I didn't know what that meant. I thought it had something to do with retail shops.
Yeah.
And so
sure.
It was like, and yeah, they're like, well, we don't really, so I start asking a series of questions that they quickly realize I have no clue. And I don't even remember what I said, but I said something about shopping and something about shoppers and it was just so bad. So it was really funny. And they just sort of humored me but I think realized this woman has no idea what she's talking about. So it was just immediately afterwards, I was like, oh my God, what does a retail investor mean? I'm looking it up and trying to learn more, spend time with our CFO. Soon after we got a proper head of investor relations and I spent a lot of time with her, but it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. And so now I think back then I liked to try to just sort of, I was careful with my words, but I would try to, I wouldn't always ask questions because I didn't want to expose maybe that I didn't know what I was talking about. Now I let it all hang out.
What is that?
If I don't understand something, listen to this. This is really funny. The other day, I was reviewing a document from our head of marketing ops, and she wrote in the document MAP, and I put a note on it, and I'm like, I know this is a really dumb question. I'm going to feel really silly when you tell me the answer. What is MAP again? She's like, marketing automation platform, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Just, forgot about it. But I ask anything today. I ask for clarification.
Who cares? There's so many darn buzzwords. You can't keep up with all of them.
There are. And I think you realize just with experience that there's no shame in asking a question and asking for clarification. But yeah, years ago, I didn't always do that. And so sometimes I misunderstood things, or in this case with the retail investors, I actually did try and answer and just revealed that I had no clue. So it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
I love it. It sounds like something that happens to me every day though. I mean, whatever, right? We just got to keep marching. marching.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, if you set the tone for your team that you don't have to pretend, and if you're not sure on something or something doesn't make sense, ask. Don't fake it. And sometimes it's that new perspective coming in where somebody is asking, they're not afraid to ask you a question or challenge something that it's like, you know what? Yeah, I've been here a long time, and you've been here 2 weeks, but your question makes me realize that I'm overthinking this, or I'm not thinking about it the right way, or whatever. And so I think we can set the tone for folks on that. And I've really come to recognize the importance of that over the years too.
Oh, love it. Well, Noreen, this has been just such a meaty interview. We covered a wide range of topics, again, from IPO to team structure, to, hey, just ask. If you don't know what it is, it's all good. Just ask. So thank you. I appreciate you're really paving the way for women and CMOs. So thank you. Thank you for all you've done and for generously sharing your time and wisdom with our audience. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. And thanks for all you're doing for the industry too. The content you're producing, your book, I've made it required reading for my team. Like it's so valuable. And so I think you've really helped to inspire and really lead folks along. So thank you for everything you're doing as well.